For more on this, out of Shanghai, Josef Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the East China Normal University. Good to see you, sir. Let me start with this. In the line that I gave earlier that China said they would limit exchanges with the U.S. Could you share a little bit about what their intentions are?
Yeah, there's a bit of a gray area in the law. It doesn't prevent other our companies or even international companies from doing business in China, but it prevents them taking money from the fund to build manufacturing outside of the U.S. And various U.S. and international companies will face market pressures to take advantage of this legislation, but at the cost of likely hamstringing their global operations. Now, this is the stark challenge facing chip makers in Asia, especially, who worry they're being forced to choose not only between China and the U.S., but between the U.S. and their own countries. However, we've seen already many foreign firms are lining up for the support because they believe they can use it to build an insurmountable edge over U.S. firms that are either old laggards or new entrants while keeping their global operations separate. And this is the irony of the bill. It might actually do more to destroy U.S. firms as more competitive international firms use these same subsidies to defeat their American rivals and America itself.
The Chinese, they had an innovation fund that supported small and medium businesses in China, and now the U.S. has a fund. So both sides want to support, I suppose, their domestic manufacturers. And I just wonder, is this a friendly sort of competitive nature, or is this going to turn into something more than it maybe needs to be?
Well, I think from Beijing's perspective, the bill targets Chinese and non-Chinese firms, again, doing business with China. And this is not the case of a developing country smartly and positively using national investments to build its industrial base. Rather, it's a developed country negatively using its wealth and power, including its ability to strong-arm various market players in third countries, into what many suspect are U.S. efforts to decouple from China economically, to choke Chinese development, and isolate China, given fears that China, above all others, pose a threat to U.S. Global dominance. Finally, from a pro-market, free trade economic point of view, this bill represents a massive financial giveaway to some of the richest and most powerful firms on the planet, who ought to be able to raise and manage their own capital instead of relying on U.S. taxpayers, instead of adding to U.S. debt, instead of provoking global insecurity.
We had a guest on yesterday talking about this, and I asked the guest, how much of an impact ultimately it would make, because, China is, arguably the leader in chips and chip manufacturing, while the U.S. has, I think, somewhere between 8, 9, and 10% of the global chip market. And the question on, how much will that move the needle was only a few percentage points for the U.S. Maybe we get to 10 or 12 or 13%, maybe 15% if the U.S. is lucky. I mean, is it that big of a deal that's going to move the needle so little on the U.S. side that would impact China when they are the dominant manufacturer for chips right now?
Well, I've seen some estimates that it might only increase manufacturing in the U.S. itself by 1%. So in this sense, it may be much ado about nothing. But more importantly, we've already seen some normalization in chip supply chains in the last several months. And one of the concerns is that this legislation is actually going to end up producing a glut. Especially if we have a global recession or economic downturn in the coming months, as some worry.
One of the things that I constantly read about is, and China has an immense advantage when it comes to this, and that's purely when it comes to cost, right? The cost of labor, the cost of construction, the cost of the equipment, and it is extremely expensive here in the U.S., and I've seen analysts after analysts rail on this issue, that the Chinese have a spectacular advantage when it comes to that. And I suppose where I'm leading this is to that despite the help that the U.S. government may or may not give some of these manufacturers, the Chinese still have an advantage because of the ongoing costs, don't they?
It's not just cost. There's several other factors, and you've alluded to this in what you've said. Let's give a little bit of a history lesson here. First, the U.S. has been talking about this kind of legislation for 3 years, has been essentially threatening to do it, but been unable politically to pull it together. And so this has led other countries who are more efficient politically, including China, including South Korea, to move faster to counter this threat. And then, the U.S. used these counters to build political momentum to pass its own act, to say, look, these other countries are subsidizing chips more and more, and now we have to as well. Second, along the way, the U.S. instigated trade war against China, the pandemic-related supply chain disruptions, the associated inflation, all of these made chip production or supply more acute. But as I've said, these have increasingly normalized, and as we move increasingly to this, the global retooling for 7-nanometer chips, we're going to face this strange dilemma where we may have an oversupply. And where various firms are going to have to try to tiptoe through a global recession.
Let's continue this conversation. We're out of time. Joseph, love to have you back. And let's see where this leads to us here the next couple of months. And I'm sure there'll be more response from China and around the world. Good to see you.